I never get invited. You know, that's a problem. I try to invite myself, but you know, that doesn't always work.
But they're open,
but that,
like to other.
some of them are very open, but also there is other, you know, the most secretive societies are the ones that make ACTA, for instance. And that's a big problem. It's a huge problem, and it's
What was that?
ACTA is
Anti-counterfeiting trade agreement.
yeah.
Okay.
And Rasmus and I, we were in London talking to a quite nice group of people that actually know about all of the
EFF people and public knowledge, all these lobby groups.
yeah. And there are some lobby groups that actually work with it, but I totally agree that more people are needed on that level. But it's also very important that to understand that, for instance, we cannot do all of that as well. We need to branch out and get more people interested and involved in it. So,
And there is also a limit to how long you can chase those international organizations. For example, it's this very clear tendency that when critical voices enters, for example, WIPO, the question already has moved over to some other organization, like the World Customs Organization, where they push parts of the ACTA and so on.
Yeah.
So
Right.
it's extremely hard to even full-time lobbyists cannot follow that because it's very intricate.
Right, and what we find is that even though these lobbyists have wheelbarrows of cash just rolling around and handing out and flying here and there and wearing expensive suits and whatnot, there's one thing that beats all that cash on hand. There is just one thing, but there is one thing, and that's votes in a democratic election. If a politician gets to choose between having dinner with this nice industry representative or being kicked out of office, then he or she will start paying more attention to the issues that people are screaming about. When there are 2,000 people outside of Parliament chanting, that gets politicians' attention. So that's our twofold approach to educating people. First of all, you can't educate people without them understanding that there is an issue in the first place. So that's the first thing, threatening their job over not understanding the issue. Second, even though you can sometimes feel extremely powerless against these mega corporations with budgets the size of Switzerland, you got to realize that in a democratic society, we can just drop kick all of that. There are millions of people who file share in Sweden. If they're pissed off enough, they're just going to vote out the politicians.
We had a question there in the second row first, yeah.
Yes, I'm just thinking, you're talking a lot of freedom of speech from the consumer perspective, and I agree totally that if you restrict those, you'll restrict freedom of speech. But I also think if you sort of let this loose, then you might restrict the freedom of speech from the producer's way. Taking music, for example, you can take that new business models are coming. You see that in India and China, producers are thinking of piracy as a way to promote themselves, doing larger revenues of concerts, etc. But taking the aspect then movies and perhaps books, there's a hard way to find how the revenue are going directly to the artists. Perhaps it's going to the, let's say, Ericsson that builds the nets for distributing this kind of traffic, but then the artist has to somehow bind the cost into their book, for an example, then writing about the expensive product placing in their art, and therefore somehow complicating or making the art or the book itself sponsored, and that might be the only way for them to survive. How do you think that will affect the freedom of speech from the artist's point of view?
I think that if you write a book and you need to put product placement in there, you're probably not going to survive on writing books anyhow. My brother is an author and he's won a lot of awards and he's never made money from the books itself. Just the whole issue of how to make and monetize, how to make the artists make money in the future is quite irrelevant actually when it comes to this issue. It's interesting, but it's quite irrelevant when it comes to the copyright enforcement and the copyright issue, because it's today copyright is actually for the companies, not for the artists.
If I just, it might be relevant for that, but it's not irrelevant for the, if I understood your point right, it's not irrelevant for the, let's say, the society, how are artists going to live? Are they going to have basic income or something like that? What's going to be the model there?
But the artists are the ones that will adapt first.
Yeah, of
So
course.
that's not a problem.
Okay,
In
now
a
we
sense
start talking like there is this group of the consumers and then there is this group, this population, which is the producers. And I completely deny the existence of such a reality. I don't see it anywhere. And I wouldn't really agree that we are talking from a consumer perspective here. At least I'm completely against consumer perspectives. And also, I mean, because first of all, we have to, if we just suggest that there exists this group of people that should have money, then we completely forget like the problematizing like who should be involved in this group and why. And if there are any connection between copyright and freedom of expression from a so-called producer perspective, then I would say then it's about the restrictions on the freedom of reusing. Copyright limits the artistic freedom of speech through banning, for example, sampling of previous music, reuse of all kinds of material. That's the only context in this where I find it. You can talk about freedom of speech in this sense.
Right. You asked about, your question sort of assumed that freedom of speech of the producer was tied to the ability to make money. That might,
To some extent.
that might have been true when the only way to publish a book was to get it approved by a publisher. But that's simply not true anymore. That is a thing of the past. If you want to publish something, you can do it totally for free. Just head down to the library, open a blog, and publish whatever you like. Freedom of speech is not anymore an issue of being able to make money off of what you write. So those two are completely disconnected. However, it brings us back to how will the artists get paid? Well, if I had a dime for every time I got that question, what it boils down to are two things. Either you get money from the state, at which point it becomes a cultural policy issue, which is not the subject of the pirate movement nor this panel, I believe. The other way to get paid is when you create something, you're an artist. Once you want to get paid for what you create, you're no longer an artist but a businessman. And in that case, the same rule applies to you as to every other businessman on this planet. You need to find somebody who is prepared to pay for what you offer. It's really that simple.
Yeah, what I don't understand is why it's even an issue. I mean, we have this thing called capitalism. Why are there panels and government boards thinking about how are these people going to make money? Since when are they in the business of creating business models? I mean, not just Magnatune, but Jamendo and 20 other companies out there, some that sell for a lot of money, like Last.fm, come up with new business models that initially are quite illegal, and they say, the hell with it, we're going to do it. I think all that needs to happen is just let capitalism go.
Right.
Decriminalize,
Right.
figure out licensing, and let us compete. And we'll figure out a way to get musicians paid or not.
Right.
Maybe one of the issues is that in several places, like in Sweden and Finland, for instance, these collecting societies are also a way of sort of getting money back to some of the artists, right? And if that goes, then, well, there has to be some other revenue stream if we still continue the same kind of social mode of getting money to some writers and some composers and so on.
I mean, right now, I've had a lot of fights with collecting societies because collecting societies are legalized monopolies, usually completely in bed with the government. And for some very strange reason, the collecting societies in America were sued, and they're not allowed to be monopolies in America, and only in America in the entire world. It's one of the few things we have more free than elsewhere. And one of the things Magnatune does is simply license collecting society waivers to companies. So if you have a shopping mall somewhere in America, you can just pay me directly, and I will tell you, you do not have to pay a collecting society. They really, really don't like this. But tough, this is called capitalism. Outcompete me, come out with a better scheme, more music, cheaper, whatever. but get the hell out of the way, because this is a new reality, and I just want to do business and innovate.
God, I had
Yes,
something.
yes, and I totally agree with this.